Hey guys, it's Matt. Welcome back to another episode of Midnight Reality, where we dive into the daily reality breakdowns that this realm affords, as well as the historical anomalies that make no sense, like what we'll be looking at today. The reality breakdown and the strange case of Humpty Dumpty. Matt, we've talked about Humpty Dumpty before. We're going to revisit this, never like we're going to do in terms of this reality deep dive on Humpty Dumpty. Yeah, we've looked at it as a stuffed Lennon. A Humpty Dumpty is always a stuffed Lennon, but a stuffed Lennon isn't always a Humpty Dumpty. Figure that one out. Before we begin, a quick note on this image. Remember, like 2.5 years ago, people submitted various types of cover art or things I could use for the midnight reality shows. I can't say Philly. Reality shows. Paul and others had hand-drawn art, but others, like Lauren here, submitted AI images. This is without a doubt the strangest one. First off, you know it's AI because the hands look like dolphin flippers. Is the AI still making major mistakes with hands? The hand here, I think this is supposed to be me, but it looks more like Sling Blade. The fingers are kind of melded together. It looks like a dolphin flipper. Hopefully the AI is doing better today with the hands. Also, it's like a Sling Blade Matt dressed with what Andy Dufresne wore at Shawshank Prison. I mean, I don't dress very well, but I don't dress like I'm about to take to the court and hang out with Red, presenting him with a harmonica, the damn Shawshank Prison. And then finally, we do need to bring back the rubber ducky. Say, I can hear you right now. If you're objecting to what I'm saying, you're firing rubber duckies at your screen, we do need to bring that back. And this final reminder, Midnight Reality is a more serious presentation. I'm sorry I have to use that word. The English language doesn't give me an appropriate synonym. It doesn't break down into the absurd and ridiculous like the old-fashioned radio show. And the topic is generally very intriguing. The topic generally reveals how strange and bizarre and not very real this world is. So smoke 'em if you got 'em. Peter Stuyvesant's only. Kick back, relax, pour yourself a drink. This is not a 1.25 exercise, bathroom boys. Let's explore the absurd reality breakdown of Humpty friggin' Dumpty. And here's the moment in history, 1865, where Humpty Dumpty catapulted to superstardom. Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, the moment when Alice comes across Humpty for the first time. However, the egg only got larger and larger as she approached, and more human. When she had come within a few yards of it, she saw that it had eyes and a nose and a mouth. And when she had come close to it, she saw clearly, Alice that is, that it was Humpty Dumpty himself. It can't be anybody else, she said to herself. I'm as certain of it as if his name were written all over his face. Now let's pause here for a moment. What jumps out at me is Lewis Carroll writes this about Humpty Dumpty and the way Alice responds as if everybody reading this worldwide, everybody that ever comes across Alice in Wonderland is going to know exactly who Humpty Dumpty is. Oh, I'm certain of it. It's him. It's him. The reader, of course, would need to know who Humpty Dumpty is. This is 1865. How well known worldwide was that son of a beach? Where did it come from? We thought this Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass pushed Humpty Dumpty into superstardom and to prominence. But the way Lewis Carroll writes, the readers already know who this little round, oblong, spheroid son of a beach already is. It's a weird phenomenon. We're going to look into the roots. The original appearance of Humpty Dumpty is not Alice in Wonderland. The roots go back farther than that, and this is proof of it here. Lewis Carroll just knows everybody reading is going to know exactly who this little fucker is. Second paragraph. It might have been written 100 times easily on that enormous face. Humpty Dumpty was sitting with his legs crossed like a Turk. That's not very nice. I'd like to apologize to the folks in Istanbul on behalf of Lewis Carroll. Sitting like a Turk on top of a high wall, such a narrow one that Alice quite wondered how he could keep his balance. And as his eyes were steadily fixed in the opposite direction, and he didn't take the least notice of her, she thought he must be a stuffed figure after all. And how exactly like an egg he is, she said aloud, standing with her hands ready to catch him, for she was every moment expecting him to fall. It is very provoking, Humpty Dumpty said after a long silence, looking away from Alice as he spoke, to be called an egg. Very. I said you looked like an egg, sir, Alice gently explained. And some eggs are very pretty, you know, she added, hoping to turn her remark into a sort of compliment. Some people, said Humpty Dumpty, looking away from her as usual, have no more sense than a baby. Alice didn't know what to say to this. It wasn't at all like conversation, she thought, as he never said anything to her. In fact, his last remark was evidently addressed to a tree, so she stood and softly repeated to herself, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty in his place again. That's weird to Matt, but we'll come back to that. That last line is much too long for the poetry, she added, almost out loud, forgetting that Humpty Dumpty would hear her. Okay, I remind you that this is Midnight Reality, not Matt reads the classics or Billy Madison, the pretty puppy story time to put certain people to bed in Australia. This is our first reality anomaly. We'll get into it slowly. So Alice presents the poem right here in Lewis Carroll's book. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty in his place again. Well, what the heck is that? Everybody listening to the sound of my voice. I'm Generation X, just over 50, but I would think almost everybody knows it like this. Sat on a wall, had a great fall. The king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Couldn't put Humpty back together again. Okay, so this is a world-famous book from Lewis Carroll. We know and we've pondered how the Knot and Ilk pushed this to stuffed Lenin prominence when it didn't deserve it. It should have been forgotten about 100 years ago, and it keeps coming. New Disney movies, new cartoons. The Knot and Ilk has to keep reintroducing this, maybe because it has to, because of the spiritual message or whatever embedded messages that it carries. It might have to carry it through time artificially as a stuffed Lenin by contract. But the key thing to note here, and where we start off Midnight Reality, is how could it have possibly have changed? Here's the reference in Wikipedia to what we all know today. Sat on a wall, had a great fall, king's horses, king's men, couldn't put Humpty together again. That's what everybody knows. Here it says, this is the common text from 1882. Remember, Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland was 1865. So basically, in less than 20 years, it changed to this. How? How does that happen? There ain't no internet. There ain't no Twitter and Twitch. How does this possibly happen? Wouldn't the Lewis Carroll book, which was what we're told was world famous at the time, cement in the exact language or rhyme or verse regarding Humpty Dumpty? This is the common text. The citation there, it says number 4. This was taken from a Yale Glee Club book. I guess the Skull and Bones singers at Yale. This is what they sang, and this is what we know today. This is what I don't know, where did this even come from? How does everybody my age know this? How was this presented in school? We all just know this for some reason, but we don't know how we know it. Couldn't put Humpty together again. Lewis Carroll would have been the more famous, the only world famous media at the time. That would have cemented in the final version of Humpty Dumpty that we know today. How did it change? I remind you, no radio, no television, no internet. This is like a reality breakdown. How the entire world knows this when what Lewis Carroll presented was completely different. Very quickly, let's go back to Alice in Wonderland just to remind you what's here in 1865. Sat on a wall, had a great fall, horses and men. Couldn't put Humpty Dumpty in his place again. I'll put you in your place, boy. I mean, what the heck is this? The main thing is, how does it change worldwide when there's nothing? If you pointed to something like a book that was more popular than Alice in Wonderland, then that took over. There isn't anything. How does this happen? We see this in reality all the time. And this, Snow White and the Mirror, Mirror versus Magic Mirror, is the best example of kind of what we're looking at here of all time. Nothing approaches this. This is a short Mandela effect related conversation where I'm potentially relating what we talked about to the Mandela effect. If you're triggered, try to stick with me just for a few minutes. I'll leave the topic very soon, I promise. But I didn't believe this when I heard this. I ran out to the Goodwill. They always have these, the big, huge, plastic, ugly Disney boxes of VHS and that horse shit. I grabbed one. They always have that crap for the VHS. And I played it. I said, this has got to be wrong. She must, maybe the first time says magic mirror on the wall, but then the second time she visits the mirror, it's got to be mirror, mirror. And that people just latched onto the latter. But no, both times, magic mirror on the wall. This is very related to what we just talked about. But let me be clear, I'm not saying the Humpty Dumpty and specifically what we just looked at is a Mandela effect. I'm not saying that at all. Generally, I'll just get to the conclusion now and we'll continue with this. This world is very fluid. Things just happen that are inexplicable. That means to you and me, they can't be explained. There's a lot of strange shit from top to bottom that in no way can be explained. And what does your friends, family, neighbors, the NPC, and the Palace Guard, and those that defend reality always have a way to explain it away? Always have a way. So let's just stick with this example. Starting with the absolute basics, you ask anybody on the street 10 years ago, what is it? Everybody says, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest one of all? Or, the second part is questionable too. I don't want to muddy the water. Forget that second part. Who's the fairest of them all? Forget that. Mirror, mirror, magic mirror is all we're going to focus on. Even today, somebody on the street, everybody still says, mirror, mirror on the wall. Now, there's no possible way, based on what reality has presented us in the chronological order it's presented us, then that can exist. The Disney movie came before the Disney book. So this major movie, and it's like 1937, 1938, was the biggest animated movie of all time. It was a gigantic monster hit, of course, like The Wizard of Oz and other things that came in the late 30s, like Gone with the Wind, etc. Now, we know, of course, both segments where she speaks to the mirror, it's magic mirror on the wall. So the book, my understanding, I'm 98% sure, the book Snow White, of course, Disney wants to sell lunch boxes and merchandise and little trinkets here and there, so they put a book out after the movie. And the book had to have come first. No, it stems from the Brothers Grimm. Disney stole it from them as they steal all this stuff from different places around the world. I mean, the Lion King came from some African tribe. They stole that. They steal everything. There's probably there probably never was any creative ability, maybe except for the Incredibles. They steal it all. They stole most of it from the Brothers Grimm. In the Brothers Grimm, in the German, it says, of course, mirror, mirror on the wall. So again, in the book, I didn't mention this, the book that came out after the movie, say it came out in 1940 or 1945 or whatever, that does say mirror, mirror on the wall. So the Disney book doesn't even match up with their own movie. But there was no book before the movie. I'm almost 99+% sure of this. The Brothers Grimm says mirror, mirror. Disney's movie says magic mirror. So what's your point, boy? Well, the point is obvious, but I'll lay it out for you. Hit me with it. The point is obvious. Nobody knows no Brothers Grimm. We didn't read no Brothers Grimm outside Chicago and Skokie, and people living in San Diego had all the Brothers Grimm and just couldn't wait for their mother to translate the German at night as they went to bed. Everybody just knows the damn movie. That's all everybody knows about Snow White. So, Matt, you're stating the obvious. We all know this, and we've seen all the dumb Mandela effect videos about this, so wrap it up. Okay. So, of course, there's no possible way anybody on the street should say mirror, mirror. So this is basic proof of the Mandela effect just from this one example. But it's similar to the Humpty Dumpty. Okay, it took me a long time to tie it in. I apologize. The fame of Alice in Wonderland is on par with the Disney movie. This is what's in Alice in Wonderland. Couldn't put him in his place again. This is all anybody should know. There's no possible way it could have changed before something going viral on the internet, for example. The only thing anybody knows about Snow White is the animated movie. There shouldn't be a person anywhere in the world on the street that would say mirror, mirror. And the people and the palace guard around us explain it away that, oh, they know the Brothers Grimm. Yeah, everybody knows the old ancient Germanic over the damn video that the mother popped the tape in as we grew up as kids. I mean, the palace guard and those that just are on the download around us will always have a way, of course, to explain it away. Never go to their idiocracy for the answer. Let's look at more puzzle pieces over the next 5 to 10 minutes to see if any of this makes a little bit of sense. I don't know what we'll find, but we have to do this together. Again, I can't do 8 hours of research and say, I don't think this would make a good video, but the Not Milk never disappoints. We always have to do this together. It's never disappointed in 15 years. The earliest known version was published in Samuel Arnold's Juvenile Amusements in 1797. Juvenile Amusements. That was on every coffee table in America and in London. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, had a great fall. 80 men and 80 more Fourscore? That's where freaking Lincoln got it from. Could not make Humpty Dumpty where he was before. Could not make Humpty Dumpty where he was before. See, that's in juvenile amusements. Why didn't Lewis Carroll just steal that? Okay, Lewis Carroll changed it and thought it would be better his version, knowing his work might be world famous someday. That makes sense. Okay, that Lewis Carroll just made that change, knowing his book or expecting his book, probably working directly for Not Milk and how they would push it artificially, knowing it would be so big. He made that change. But the point is, if this was, say, the original, how did it become world famous? It gets back to what we've talked about many times. And the most interesting and fun part of this conversation is the bar conversation, where whoever came up with this, it would have been thrown out. It would have never made it into juvenile amusements. Hello? Sam, are you the managing editor of Juvenile Amusements? Yeah, well, there was no telephone. But just go with it. Just go with it. And they say it's like 2 soup cans and a string. Just go with it. I submitted my little poem about Humpty Dumpty. Are you going to consider it for your publication in 1797? Oh, you're the one that wrote that shit about On the Wall in the Great Fall? Oh, that sucks. We're not going to put that in Juvenile Amusements. It's called Juvenile Amusements. This will kill our readership. Why don't you go back to digging trenches or whatever you do? Just stop writing. You can't write. Your Humpty Dumpty submission, I know exactly what you're talking about. It sucks rocks. See, it would have never gone anywhere. That's the most fascinating thing about all of this. We forget. It's just like in our mind, it just deserves to exist. It doesn't deserve to exist. For it to exist and be world famous, guess what? For reality to make sense, it has to be good. It sucks rocks. Okay, remember, what we just looked at, 1797. The first time it ever popped up anywhere, according to official history, 1797. Well, of course, we must assume that through oral tradition, whatever that means, people knew about this damn egg. But okay, that's the first time. Now we have 1803, also published in 1810, Mother Goose's Melody, also put in a version of Gammer Gutten's Garland. What the hell is Gammer Gutten's Garland? That's the 3 G's. What the heck is that? Humpty Dumpty sat on Humpty Dumpty sate, S-A-T-E, on a wall. Was this in English? Humpty, and then they changed the name, the spelling of the name to Humpty with an I to Dumpty with an I. Had a great fall. What? And then they changed the next line, 60 men and 60 more. They got rid of the horses. So did the other one have the horses? We'll go back and look. Why you change it from 40 to 60? What'd those 20 men you got rid of ever do to you? This makes no sense. But the last line, let's continue. Matt, the Not Milk's trying to muddy up the waters on you. Let's just stick to the last line. That's the whole point of this presentation. Thank you, Britney Spears, Matt, talking to Matt. Cannot place Humpty Dumpty as he was before. Okay? Now, if what came out in the what was that thing called? Juvenile something or other? Wouldn't that have cemented what the real version is? And wouldn't Mother Goose have followed with the same thing? Everybody keeps changing it. Reality keeps changing it. This is a lesson in reality itself, people. Okay, what's next? 1842. This is more than 20 years before Alice in Wonderland and Lewis Carroll. James Orchard Halliwell published a collected version as this. Humpty Dumpty lay in a beck with all his sinews around his neck. 40 doctors and 40 rights couldn't put Humpty Dumpty to rights. So he just completely going to change it. This James Orchard Howell said, James, you sure she did? James said, I'm going to do what I want. Who you talking to? I'm James Orwood Halliwell. I publish what I want. I don't care what has already been laid down by these has-been nobodies. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to put that son of a bitch in a beck and put sinews around his neck. What the hell's a sinew? And by the way, there was no horses yet. It was 40 men. That's 80 to you and me and Abe Lincoln. Then some son of a bitch changed it to 60 men. A score is 20, so that's 60. This is now, he says, fuck the score. 40 doctors. He said, I ain't putting in 2 score. I do my own thing. I'm James Orwood Halliwell. 40 doctors and 40 rights couldn't put that son of a beach to rights. Now, other than it just being changed all over the place, version to version, every 20 or 30 years, whatever it may be, what's most interesting is the third line reduces by 20. 40 is 80. men. It talks about men again in the other one. 60. Now 40, and not men, doctors and rights. I don't care what a right is. I'm not going to look it up. Okay, so it's men, 80, then 60. Now it's down to 40. I'm a little concerned. If it gets lower than 10 people, as this keeps being published, they're not going to have enough hands to put that Humpty back together again. Here is 1843. Evidence of an alternative American version, closer to the modern version. William Carey Richards, published in an issue of Children's Magazine for 1843, he comments that he had come across it as a riddle when he was 5 years old, and the answer was an egg. So here's where the oral tradition comes in. People were talking about this stupid shit on the playground, I guess, and not milk will get us to believe anything. So I looked this up. William Carey Richards. He's got the three names, Matt. Are you skeptical of him? Yeah, a little bit. 1818. He was born. So in 1825, little 5-year-olds are playing outside and they're giving riddles to each other about Humpty Dumpty, with the answer being an egg. How would they even know about Humpty? Again, let's not forget the most important point here. For something to survive through history, through time, it has to be pretty good. I can understand why certain Da Vinci paintings say survive to make it into the Louvre. Not the Mona Lisa. That should have been thrown away immediately. But other work is almost photorealism. I can understand that. It has to be good to survive the ages. Most of what we look at is something carried through time artificially by the Knock-Knock as being a Humpty Dumpty, or the higher term, a stuffed Lenin. The reason we look at it in the first place, it's not very good. It shouldn't have survived even the day whoever created it. Somebody should have looked, not just Humpty Dumpty, whatever, even Allegory of the Cave. It makes no sense why that should have survived. If you think about this stuff for more than a minute, even things that are supposed to be genius and insightful, really there's no way they should have survived the ages. They survive the ages because the Knock-Knock is either contractually bound to carry it through time because it carries a truth or a spiritual message, or for whatever reason it serves Knock-Knock. Either way, it's not possible. Even something considered so brilliant today, Play-Doh's Allegory of the Cave. You come out, hey Play-Doh, you do that on your own, you steal that from Socrates too. You ever have an original thought of your own Play-Doh? You just steals like Disney from Socrates and anyway, they wouldn't have survived. So Plato says to whoever he's talking about this, or he's giving lectures, and somebody raises their hand and says, Mr. Plato, you're very smart and brilliant, and I love your work on happiness and all the stuff about the trials of man, but this just don't make no sense. Let me get this straight. People sitting in a cave, and there's some projections from shadows, but they think it's real, and you're trying to in some way relate that to this world. And look at my hand right in front of me. It's all real. You want me to smash this rock on your foot? I'll show you how real it is, and it ain't no shadow rock. It wouldn't have gone anywhere. Would have been shut down and forgotten about the next day. What's so brilliant to us, because we have all this quantum stuff, the matrix, we think differently. Back in the day, Play-Doh's Allegory of the Cave would have been ridiculous. It would have actually put him out of business as a philosopher. He would have been homeless. It wouldn't have survived one day. So to jump back and finish up the prior segment, this William Carey Richards, what he wrote in the Children's Magazine 1843, is basically what we have today. Sat on a wall, had a great fall. Here's the first introduction, I think, of horses. King's horses, king's men. Couldn't put Humpty together again. Okay, 1843. Be 1865 for Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland. Of course, he changed it. What we notice thus far is every single time that history notes Humpty Dumpty came back into prominence from a famous author of the time, every single time, almost every major element has changed. I know most of you can't read this, guys, so let me just describe this. So we're up to 1868 at the Olympic Theater, I guess in New York, Humpty Dumpty by George L. Fox, an original pantomime. That's no talking. They're going to pantomime Humpty Dumpty and expect to get one person in the theater? Honey, let's go to the Olympic Theater tonight. What's playing? Humpty Dumpty. That little stupid rhyme we all kind of heard little bits and pieces about as a kid. It's like 3 lines. How do you do a whole theater for a whole show of Humpty Dumpty? A few lines. It doesn't make not just that, honey. It's a pantomime. They don't say anything. I guess the thing just falls off the wall, and then that's about it. They wouldn't have put one person in the seats. This doesn't make any sense unless somehow the Knock had to do it to satisfy a contractual requirement. This is sick. We're up to 1904, a famous book of the time, Denslow's Humpty Dumpty, adapted and illustrated by W. Denslow. There's that name again written like that. L. Frank Baum, F. Frank Baum, The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Hey, Fitzgerald, is your name F. Fitzgerald or Scott Fitzgerald? Why don't you just write your name normally? Why you got to write W. Denslow? Write your name. What's the matter with these people? It's Denslow's Humpty Dumpty. Oh, wow. Everybody loves Denslow. Let's see. And somebody's about to buy this. And little kid, I want to see Denslow's Humpty Dumpty. Mommy, buy it for me. Buy it for me. What could he have possibly have written, son? It's 4 lines. What do you mean an adaptation? The damn egg falls off the wall. Everybody knows it. I'm not spending 95 cents on this. It's 4 lines. I'll get you something else. Don't worry, guys, I'm not going to read this. We have to be done with the Wikipedia anyway. This is just to make a simple point. Of course, nobody knows where it came from. Nobody knows where it originally came from. All these different theories. Here, it was a canon. Humpty Dumpty was a canon in the St. Mary at the Wall and the Royalist defenders in the siege of 1648. Colchester was a walled town with a castle and several churches. The story given the large cannon called Humpty Dumpty was strategically placed on the wall. A shot from a parliamentary cannon succeeded in damaging the wall beneath Humpty Dumpty, so the cannon fell down. Nobody knows, of course, where it came from. And how many things are in our reality that just strangely just find their way through the centuries that nobody knows where they came from? And finally, bringing us up to 2024, this example here is Humpty Dumpty in Shrek. We know it's been used and cited in tens of thousands of different places. If you add up everything, every mention in a song, every watercolor, every mention in a book, tens of thousands of references. There are just probably 1,000 Google images you can find. That's the 1,000 right there. So it just doesn't make any sense. This is a stuffed Lenin and its own name, a Humpty Dumpty. It is carried through time artificially because for some way in this reality it has to be. Therefore, we look very closely at it. It carries a meaning of tremendous importance, spiritual importance, whatever Humpty Dumpty is involved in or associated with, other than, the trivial like Shrek. I'm not sure we should analyze Shrek for weeks looking for some sort of spiritual meaning, but in many cases we should pay attention to it. So for anybody that doesn't want to keep going with this video, to me, and we've talked about this many times over the years, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, had a great fall, represents us in coming in this reality. Some say the fall of Lucifer or whatever. No, to me it's just us in this reality, and we had a great fall, which is the best way to describe coming in here. It's not a fall down here with Lucifer with the 1/3. To me, it's we intended to come experience this very low place, this very low plane. It's all by design. We had a great fall. And all the king's horses and all the king's men can't put you back together again. It's the ultimate expression of worry about yourself. If you look to the king's horses and king's men to put you back together, that's society, culture, authority, certain professors in the Ivy League. If you look to these eggheads and assholes for the answers to put you back together, you're going to sit there in pieces. See, you got to worry about yourself. This is the ultimate worry about yourself. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. If there was another line, it would say, you get up and put yourself back together. Then get the hell out of this reality. That's the spiritual message, spiritual message that it carries for me. And it's quite simple. To me, there's no other way it could have survived through the ages. No possible way this piece of shit survives if it doesn't carry the spiritual message, because it has to survive. Now, my advice to you is don't take this too far. I'm not going to take this too far. I'm not a lunatic. I'm not going to say, our homework assignment is let's analyze every single nursery rhyme or every little jingle carried through time. Some are just kind of catchy, and maybe you can understand why they survived. B-I-N-G-O, B-I-N-G-O, and bingo was his name. That's pretty good. Maybe the first person that was humming that down at the bar, somebody that didn't even know that person, leaned in and said, "What you singing there? I like that. What, can you do that again?" He said, "Sure. B-I-N-G-O, and bingo was his name." Oh, I like that. I'm going to take that back to my kids. Not everything carries a gigantic spiritual message. I'm not a lunatic. Now, here's the thing. When we have a double Humpty Dumpty, or Humpty Dumpty inside of a stuffed Lennon, it might be worth taking a very close look at. It's like a double stuffed Oreo. Here we have a Humpty Dumpty, which is Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. That shouldn't have survived past 1910. And then we have the original Humpty Dumpty inside a Humpty Dumpty story inside Alice in Wonderland. It's like a double stuffed Oreo. So in other words, look, Alice in Wonderland, at the time, maybe people did take to it. Maybe nobody had ever written in this style with such strange fantasy. Maybe, I can't put myself into the 1860s. I don't know how this would have taken off. But I do know, say, from 1950 and 1960 on, nobody would have really cared. But again, this has shown up and cited in thousands of different places in songs and paintings, and Disney will do a whole new motion picture through the looking glass. It just doesn't make any sense. It's cited in The Matrix. It's all over the place. It's a Humpty Dumpty inside of a Humpty Dumpty. So there could be something very worth looking at here. The not note gives itself away. And by the way, as we do this, again, we're going to continue that engagement between Humpty Dumpty and Alice in where she meets Humpty Dumpty in Alice in Wonderland. You'll see Humpty Dumpty he's a gruff little nasty little son of a bitch egg, as you'll see. "My name is Alice, but it's a stupid name enough," Humpty Dumpty interrupted impatiently. "What does it mean?" "Must a name mean something?" Alice asked doubtfully. "Of course it must. He's a nasty little thing, isn't he? He's like somebody should put him on a plate and fry him up." Humpty Dumpty said with a short laugh, "My name means the shape I am. And a good handsome shape it is, too. With a name like yours, you might be any shape, almost." "Why do you sit out here all alone?" said Alice, not wishing to begin an argument with that nasty little thing. "Why? Because there's nobody with me," cried Humpty Dumpty. "Did you think I didn't know the answer to that?" "Ask another." "Don't you think you'd be safer down on the ground?" Alice went on, not with any idea of making another riddle, but simply in her good-natured anxiety for the queer creature. Can they do that? Can they say that? That's got to be removed. This is going to be on the banned book list for his queer nature. "But I'm reading Alice in Wonderland. That wall is so very narrow." She's worried about Humpty Dumpty, and he continues to be nasty. "What tremendously easy riddles you ask," Humpty Dumpty growled out. "Of course I don't think so. Why, if ever I did fall off, which there's no chance of, but if I did, here he pursed up his lips and looked so solemn and grand that Alice could hardly help laughing. "If I did fall," he went on, "the king has promised me." "Ah, you may turn pale if you like. You didn't think I was going to say that, did you? The king has promised me with his very own mouth to blank and blank blank." And then Alice interrupts. "To send all his horses and all his men?" Alice interrupted rather unwisely. He knows that Humpty Dumpty on the wall. He knows his own nursery rhyme associated with himself. I guess he's embarrassed to say it. Humpty continues and says, "Oh, well, they may write such things in a book," Humpty Dumpty said in a calmer tone. "That's what you call a history of England, that is. Now take a look at me. Look at me! I'm one that has spoken to a king, I am." The I am's like smushed together for some reason. Is that like the I am that I am from the Ten Commandments? "Maybe you'll never see such another. And to show you I'm not proud, you may shake hands with me." And he grinned almost from ear to ear as he leant forwards, and as nearly as possible fell off the wall in doing so. We'll come back to this. He does not fall off the wall. And offered Alice his hand. She watched him a little anxiously as she took it. If he smiled much more, the end of his mouth might meet behind, she thought, and then I don't know what would happen to his head. I'm afraid it would come off, said Alice. Yes, all his horses and all his men, Humpty Dumpty went on, they would pick me up again in a minute, they would. However, this conversation is going on a little too fast. Let's go back to the last remark but one. Alice says, I'm afraid I can't remember it. So it's just, the language here is very strange. Take my hand, and as nearly as possible fell off the wall in doing so. Kind of, I think that basically saying he reached out his hand to Alice, and as far as he possibly could, where if he would have gone any further in trying to shake her hand, he would have fallen off the wall. But here, this is a truth drop. Humpty is extremely arrogant, extremely proud. The ego, the hubris, whatever that means. Now take a good look at me. I'm the one that has spoken to a king. That's like in Bagger Vance. What was it? Not Bobby Jones, but Walter Hagen says, you know why I once had the next king of England hold the pin for me? I'm the one that has spoken to a king. I am. And the I am is smushed together. Like he's declaring himself some sort of god or something. Mayhap you'll never see such another. You'll never see something like me. He's very proud of himself, and the worst aspect or quality of all. And to show you I'm not proud, at least one that's very cocky and arrogant. And the better thing would be is somebody to admit, yes, I'm cocky and arrogant. But to be that way and to say I'm not like that, that's the worst. And to show you I'm not proud, you may shake my hand. So it's basically, and to show you I'm not really into celebrity, you may have my autograph, is basically what it's saying there. I mean, this is a being like this, a truth drop. Some arrogant son of a beach is going to have a great fall. He's so arrogant that he's not worried about the fall. And if he does, he says, oh, I know the king. I know the king. I've spoken to the king. Oh, they'll help me out. They'll help me out. Yes, truth drop. This is the very definition of what Not Milk tries to turn everybody into and what you don't want to become. Second to last paragraph. Yes, all his horses and all his men, Humpty Dumpty went on. They'd pick me up again in a minute, they would. The false belief of the people in experts, in society, in academia, in many cases in the medical system, in doctors, in politicians. The false hope of the masses in whatever degenerate society can produce. He's looking, hey, if anything happens to me, all the king's horses and all the king's men represents today's modern society. They'll help me out. No, when you need them most, they'll leave you hanging. They'll leave you in little pieces, you Humpty little bastard. In that case, we start afresh, said Humpty Dumpty, and it's my turn to choose a subject. He talks about it just as if it was a game, thought Alice. So here's a question for you, Alice. How old did you say you were? Alice made a short calculation and said, 7 years and 6 months. Wrong, Humpty Dumpty exclaimed triumphantly. You never said a word like it. Oh, isn't he clever? He said, how old did you say you were? And she had never said it yet, so he's really got her. He's getting into while we're looking at this, he's getting into the truth drop of the real meaning of words. This is the entree into it, whatever that means. And Alice, he says, wrong, Humpty Dumpty exclaimed. You never said a word like it. Well, I thought you meant, how old are you? If I had meant that, I'd have said it, said Humpty Dumpty. Alice didn't want to begin another argument, so she said nothing. 7 years and 6 months, Humpty Dumpty repeated thoughtfully, an uncomfortable sort of age. Now, if you'd asked my advice, I'd have said, leave off at 7, but it's too late now. Stop at 7. I'd never ask advice about growing, Alice said indignantly. Too proud? The other inquired. Alice felt even more indignant at this suggestion. I mean, she said, that one can't help growing older. One can't, perhaps, said Humpty Dumpty, but two can. With proper assistance, you might have left off at 7. Now, I'll turn the page in just a second, but in the original draft version from Lewis Carroll, which I have right in front of me, Alice replies back to Humpty Dumpty. This never made it in the final version of the book. Alice says something along the lines of, I don't want to stop aging at 7. I want to grow older to someday be old enough to have a family, to buy cigarettes and alcohol, to gamble. And then she said what I've been saying for years. She said, hey, Egg, worry about yourself. If you want to stop at 7, that's good for you. Don't put that on me, you degenerate little bastard sitting up here on a wall all day. Do you work, sir? Just like she said in The Big Lebowski. She said, are you employed, sir? You worry about yourself. I want to grow older for these reasons. Now, I skipped forward about a page before I'll start reading again. Just more nonsense ensues. She says, nice belt. He says, it's a cravat, C-R-A-V-A-T, which goes around the neck. But because it's Humpty Dumpty, it's an egg, you don't know where the neck ends and the waist begins. So it's not a belt, it's a cravat. But he's slowly and continuously stressing the meaning of words. They talk about, isn't it better to get unbirthday presents? If you could get a present on every day that's not your birthday, just more nonsense. Here's where the meaning of words kind of comes to a head. And only one for birthday presents, you know. There's glory for you. I don't know what you mean by glory, Alice said. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously, with contempt. Of course you don't, till I tell you what I mean. I meant, there's a nice knockdown argument for you. But glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument, Alice objected. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said, in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make words mean so many different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be master, that's all. Now, in general, Alice, at just over 7 years old, can pretty much match wits with Humpty Dumpty. She's doing a pretty good job holding her own. As a 7-year-old, I mean, she's kind of replying as if she's in her mid-20s, or that really hardcore arguer, the little girl in True Grit, who negotiates for the ponies, you know? I mean, Alice, but if, let's just say, I don't expect much more from a 7-year-old, but if she really was that world-class arguer who got the horses back and then went to seek the employment of Marshal Coghlan, you can just wallow in filth all day. I need to find Tom Chaney. If she was like that, she would have replied, well, wait a second, Humpty. Quiet. You shut your little egg mouth. So let me get this straight. You just kind of lambasted me, whatever that means, because I need to be more aware of the true meaning of words. You said, how old again did you say you were? And then I said 7 and 6 months. You said, well, I didn't say that. I asked you how old did you say you were, and you hadn't said it yet. Ha ha ha. And then you had just lambasted me, whatever that means, saying, stressing the meaning of words. Now you tell me that you can change the meaning of words, and 1 minute later you tell me the meaning is what you say it is? Why don't you get your story right, you little degenerate egg on a wall? All kidding aside, and we'll see how this concludes. I'm sure Alice leaves Humpty very soon, and this story continues to talk about words. I don't know what's coming. Something about verbs is coming up. We'll look at it. But he does go out of his way to stress to Alice to analyze the literal meaning of words. How old did you say you were? Well, she hadn't said anything. She assumes he wants to know how old she is. And he's basically like, don't assume anything. Answer me literally. And then it switches. It's very odd. It switches to, when I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean. And he's completely going 179 and a half on his story just about a minute later. So I don't know. This is just awfully strange. But there's some weird truth drop here, in my opinion. Again, Humpty Dumpty itself is carried through time artificially. Let's move on and see what this final section says. I'm going to return to, which is to be master. That's very impactful. There's some sort of truth. I'm going to return to that, no doubt. But let's just see how this concludes. Alice was too much puzzled to say anything. So after a minute, Humpty Dumpty began again. They've a temper, some of them, particularly verbs. They're the proudest. Adjectives you can do anything with, but not verbs. However, I can manage the whole lot of them. Oh, he's great. I can manage it all. Impenetrably. That's what I say. Would you tell me, please, said Alice, what that means? Now you talk like a reasonable child, said Humpty Dumpty, looking very much pleased. Okay, he's very pleased. Remember, he just said, the words mean what I say they mean. What's that from? There's a movie. What's that? That's Sling Blade. You're a toonsmith. The words go, they mean what I say they mean. The ... goes where I say it goes. I think the ... goes before medulla oblongata. No, you're a toonsmith. That's from Sling Blade, sorry. So she remembers it's what he says. So she says, well, tell me, please, what that means. You have to tell me. She no longer, and then this quick conversation can determine the meaning for herself. And he's very pleased that she waits for him to tell him now. Now you talk like a reasonable child, said Humpty Dumpty, looking pleased. I meant impenetrably that we've had enough of that subject, and it would be just as well if you'd mention what you mean to do next, as I suppose you don't mean to stop here all the rest of your life. That's a great deal to make one word mean, Alice said in a thoughtful tone. This is a very quick-witted 7-year-old. When I make a word do a lot of work like that, said Humpty Dumpty, I always pay it extra. Oh, said Alice. She will soon be Alex. She was too much puzzled to make any other remark. Well, guess what, Alice? Me too. This is a bunch of nonsense horseshit. Once we get the truth drops, I'm never going to read this crap again. Well, Matt, how do you know there has to be truth drops here? Well, there doesn't have to be. But when something is to this degree of a stuffed Lennon or a Humpty Dumpty, when it's really not that good and it's carried through time this aggressively with Broadway shows and endless movies and references and sightings, then we look at it closely because it's a Humpty Dumpty stuffed Lennon carried through time by the knot note because contractually maybe it has to, because it contains the highest truths of how this reality works and tells you about your spiritual self. Okay, hopefully one more segment here to conclude this, and then we'll try to wrap it up, pull the truth out of it, and hopefully never read this horseshit again. You should see him come round me a Saturday night. He's talking about okay, let's back up a second. He decides on the meaning of words. Some words he decides to give a very complicated definition to. He will assign a complicated meaning, and then he has to pay the words in some way. Alice said, I don't even want to know what he means by that. How does he pay him? With some sort of disgusting sexual favor? He has to pay the words, and the verbs are different than the adjectives. So then to get their wages, he says, you should see him come around me of a Saturday night. All the words come back that he had to create some bogus definition and assign to, Humpty went on, wagging his head gravely from side to side. Hey, Lewis, he don't have a head. Who wrote this? For to get their wages, the words, he has to pay them. Alice didn't venture to ask what he paid them with. And so you see, I can't tell you. What's Lewis Carroll doing breaking the fourth wall here? He don't talk to the reader directly much in this, does he? Lewis, this is a mistake. You seem very clever at explaining words, sir, said Alice. Would you kindly tell me the meaning of the poem called Jabberwocky? Let's hear it, said Humpty Dumpty. I can explain all the poems that ever were invented. And a good many that haven't been invented just yet. This sounds very hopeful. So Alice repeated the first verse. Okay, the words are just a mess. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves, just nonsense. Words you've never heard before, Old English. In the next segment, Humpty Dumpty will to tell her what the words mean. We flip-flopped again. He will tell her what the words mean in normal, everyday, common usage, but then just a minute back he says they mean what I say they mean. Okay, it's very, very odd. Let's just focus on this one part. This is whenever you come across somebody, just in general, you all know this, but it's worth reiterating. You come across somebody that this level of arrogance, never use their arrogance against them like a pendulum. If you are at odds with them in any way, not to for just to get off on it. She changes up again. Very, very clever little 7-year-old. She will use his arrogance against him. Start praising him. Stop fighting with him. Start praising him. That's what you get. How you get what you want. You seem very clever at explaining words. There's no reason to fight with this guy. His arrogance is such he will never come around to her argument, whatever it is. Someone or something with that level of ego cannot be overcome. So you actually would feed the ego, throw straw onto the fire, get him more worked up into his own ego. So here she does that, and he says even more praise onto himself. I can explain all the poems that ever were invented. Overall, here it's good advice. It's especially good advice for somebody in their early 20s starting their career. You come across somebody that's that overly confident, that much ego. Never try to take it head on. Back down and feed it, falsely feed its ego. It will eventually and somehow sink itself. Never try to take it head on. Praise it. Oh, you're even better than I thought. And then, but not in a condescending way. If it comes across as condescending, or are you mocking me, sir? Then it can, if you're a young person at work, it can backfire too. But there's no way you come across this level of ego in a business setting or whatever. For I don't know why you'd want to take it on, but you can't take it on. If there's any way you need to win whatever the confrontation is, you need to feed it and have it back itself into a corner. Can't beat it directly. Okay, in about a page or so that we're not going to look at, Alice leaves Humpty Dumpty behind to go off to whoever she meets next in Wonderland. He continues to define these strange words in this poem. Then he says, I've got a verse for you, and he just starts into this song slash verse slash poem that just goes on for a long time, which I scanned it a few times. It just kind of looks like nonsense. She interrupts him a few times, and then basically just cuts his own poem off, and he says goodbye. And she kind of leaves, and it's a little strange. So let's just go revisit that one part. Let's return here to the most important exchange between Humpty Dumpty and Alice to see if we can get one little more tidbit out of it. Let's just stick with the first sentence for a moment and not read further. And only one for birthday presents, There's glory for you. This has to do with the concept he introduces right before this called, I got this, what you called a belt. It's a cravat, was it? The scarf around the neck that rich people in the 1800s wore, a cravat, and she gets the meaning of the word incorrect. He's such a master of words, he's created the term unbirthday present, and in some way it's influenced his reality. He says, well, I got this, what you think is a nice belt, as a cravat. You don't understand the difference between my neck and my waist, but this is an unbirthday present. And she's like, what do you mean an unbirthday present? Well, this makes more sense. Every other day of the year, 364, is not your birthday. So flip reality around and get presents every day except your birthday. Get unbirthday presents. He's such a master of words. He's introduced terms that in some way have changed his reality because people are giving him unbirthday presents. He says, I'm better than you. He says to Alice, you just get a present on your birthday. I'm better than you. I get presents 364 days. I declared unbirthday presents. Okay. So he says, there's glory for you. What I think he means by this, if you can be the master of words like I am, the Humpty Dumpty says, like the knot milk is, there's glory for you. You can change your reality. And she's like, I don't know what you mean by glory for me, related to the use of words. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously with contempt, disdain. Of course you don't, you little human, till I tell you. This is the knot milk talking potentially. I meant there's a knockdown argument for you. Knockdown argument, glory. If you can redefine words for your own use, for your own Jared Kushner ambitions. But glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument, Alice objected. When I use a word, Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. The knot milk is a master of words. In the English language, it's black magic spells. The question is, said Alice, whether you can even make words so many different things. Can anybody do it, she's saying? Can you do that? The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be master? That's all. In my opinion, this is basically the knot milk as Humpty Dumpty. He says, when I use a word, it means what I say it means, what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. You little human son of a beach. And then Alice says, wait a second. Can you do that? Can you just change it means what you say? Can anybody do that? She says, well, you can't do that, can you? And he says, no. The question is, sure I can do it. He says, which is to be master. That is all. Which means to me, Alice, you look to the words as having predefined definitions. You must fit into the words, the structure of the words and the vocabulary. And the English language, the Romance languages, came before you. You try to fit into it. It is master over you. Humpty's saying, I am master over it. I can be master over language, where I get unbirthday presents, create nonsense, have to pay my verbs and adjectives. He probably pays them with different types of words which he just can produce on his own for free, the way the Fed prints up money for nothing, for example. Which is master, Alice? It seems like the language is master over you. You're always trying to fit in it. He says, I'm master over language. He says, I'm not milk. Now move on, you little human. If anyone was curious, this is a cravat, by the way. And please, if I'm mispronouncing it, please don't waste the comment. It doesn't matter. This is exactly what I think Thurston Howell III wore through 8 seasons of Gilligan's Island. Girls, if you ever go on a date, young women in their 20s listening to me, of which there's maybe 1 or 2, and the gentleman shows up in a cravat, just check, please. Just what did I say? I didn't even introduce myself. Young man, you're wearing a cravat. This isn't Gilligan's Island. I think I'm going to excuse myself. Goodbye. And to conclude our conversation about the importance of language, and as Humpty says, who is master of it, I immediately thought of a video I did less than 2 weeks ago, where Not Milk introduced this term, just created out of the blue, jugging. Frightening Texas jugging incident caught on camera amid nationwide increase in violent robberies. Just pulled the term out of the blue, introduced it as it's the master of language. People that will then fit into it, will bow down to it, will start using its terminology. It's the same old crime that's always happened. Somebody robs somebody with a gun. Well, there are other names for that, names that have been used for hundreds of years. What's the point of this jugging? Well, it gets back to what Humpty said. He said, no, Alice. He said, who is master? Are you bowing down before the vocabulary and language, or are you creating it? Are you master over it? Look at this smacked ass with his cravat around his neck. But if you see this on the street, guys, don't mess with these people. Leave them alone. Don't just get on top of a mailbox and point. He's wearing a cravat. Look at this. He thinks he's Thurston Howell III. Leave these people alone. If somebody is that kind of warped mentally, where they're going to walk around, especially if you're under age 70, wearing something like this, don't jump up on top of a mailbox. Say, look at it. It's 90 degrees, sir. You think are you cold out? Is your neck going to get cold? Oh, leave them alone. Leave them alone. In terms of what you see here, Alice in Wonderland book covers, I continue to scroll down through the images, and there may be hundreds of different book covers for Alice in Wonderland. Hundreds of different print runs. Hundreds. And if you include every place that it's, again, ever been mentioned or referenced in a movie or a TV show or another book, you're looking at potentially, in terms of reference, hundreds of thousands of references in other forms of media. Not 1,000 or 2, hundreds of thousands. Now, when something is carried through time with this degree of prominence, when it's not that good, it is without a doubt a stuffed Lennon / Humpty Dumpty. Maybe it was a nice little work in 1865. Maybe it was a degree of fantasy that was just new and unique, and it was just different. And maybe it did go per the day, kind of what we call viral today, and everyone was talking about it. But say about, 1890 or 1905, it would have just gone away. It's not that good. It really isn't. Oh, that Cheshire cat is so clever. This exchange with Humpty Dumpty, it's just not that great. It's carried through time because there's truths in it. They could be spiritual truths. They could be truths about how reality works, how the Not Milk is master over language, all sorts of things. But once something is identified as a Humpty Dumpty or stuffed Lennon, we should pay pretty close attention to it. I guess maybe we should have 5 or 8 years ago. I don't think there's any Humpty Dumpty, say, that's going to be brought to my attention that I overlooked that's going to change my half page. If I don't think we've missed any of the major stuffed Lennons. If we have, again, they're fun to look at. But basically, of course, for the old guard here, we're just reiterating what we already know. I don't think it's going to change my half page. But it does, I mean, if I was pretty much 100% sure about this concept of the stuffed Leonard or the Humpty Dumpty, and why the reality itself, and or the not milk by contract, needs to carry this stuff through time. Remember, it's not just stuff like this. It's Plato's Allegory of the Cave and thousands of things that should have been, just forgotten about 200, 500, 1,000 years ago that are still with us today. And by the way, a reality that needs to do that for real spiritual beings, that's not a reality that has a hijacked situation or position over people. If a reality needs to do certain things for spiritual beings, needs to present something, to play within the rules or to stay within its contract or whatever reason, that is not a reality that's been hijacked and taken over, and we're in some sort of a soul trap. This, of course, is the Lochnar in one of the opening scenes from the movie Heavy Metal, and the Lochnar is apparently trying to mind control this little girl or dominate her. I don't know if the Lochnar at this time knows that she's the last Terrakian. Trust me, as the last Terrakian, she's going to get the better of this Lochnar. I don't know the Lochnar knows who he's picking on, but I don't know. But let's just, she's very scared in the beginning here. She doesn't know, I guess, she's the last of the warrior race. The whole house is glowing emerald green. You know what? Why are they presenting the emerald green as evil, Matt, if it's supposed to be neutral? Well, we'll talk about that some other time. There's a lot of instances where the not milk has presented the emerald green as very evil. That doesn't mean I have to take the bait on what the not milk presents me, right? If it puts a little bit of cheese on a cracker and hands it to me with like a slimy arm, I don't have to take it and put it in my mouth. I don't think the emerald green is evil, but let's talk about that some other time. So I walk by on the street. The whole house is glowing green. They show that in Heavy Metal. All the green is radiating out the windows. And I said, well, what the hell's going on up there? A rave of some kind? I want a part of that. There's no music, though. So I walk right in, and there's the Lochnar trying to mind control the last Terrakian. And again, at this point, the little girl doesn't know who she is. She's very scared. And I say, excuse me, Lochnar, I don't know what you're trying to do to that little girl, but can I interrupt you for just a moment? I know who you are, Lochnar, and I know you've now brought evil into this reality system. You came from a distant dimension. Let me just ask you, Lochnar, what are you going to do about planting all the really uplifting spiritual messages and all the things that real spiritual beings can take away from different forms of media, in terms of songs, movies, music, nursery rhyme, the mundane, the comical? I mean, how are you going to make sure your uplifting spiritual messages are in everything? Because isn't that what you have to do here? Now, if it was really hijacked and it was just pure evil, the Lochnar would I was going to say look at me, but it doesn't, I guess it doesn't have a head or anything. It would just glow back at me and say, "What the fuck are you talking about? There'll be no spiritual messages in media." If it was pure evil and hijacked, right, why would we expect it to put uplifting messages and songs and movies and nursery rhymes and all over the place where a certain percentage of us can see it and use it to understand ourselves? It was pure evil. The Lochnar would say, "That's the stupidest fucking thing I ever heard." It wouldn't care about putting those messages in. Now, I don't know if this last segment worked or not, but I'm going to keep it in. Laugh at me if you need to. As long as the point is made and you understand what I'm saying, it doesn't matter if I pulled this segment off. It was just really, really dumb. Thanks for listening.